The United States of America, a nation born from revolution, built on the ideals of liberty, and destined to become the most powerful force the world has ever known. But what's the secret behind this extraordinary rise? How did a fledgling nation, just a few centuries old, ascend to dominate global politics, economics, and culture? Was it the visionary courage of its founding fathers, the relentless ingenuity of its people, or perhaps something more, hidden forces that shaped the very identity of America? In this documentary, we'll uncover the untold stories, the pivotal moments, and the trailblazing individuals whose decisions and actions altered the course of history. From the battles of independence to the unpredictable challenges of the modern world, the United States' journey is a tapestry of triumphs, struggles, and profound transformations that have left an indelible mark on our global stage. But here's the twist. The truth behind America's rise is far more complex than mere politics and warfare. There are layers of history, power plays, and culture-shifting decisions that have remained in the shadows, waiting to be revealed. Step behind the curtain and uncover the hidden forces that helped shape the United States into the superpower we know today. You won't just learn about history, you'll discover the secrets behind the most influential nation on Earth. Stay tuned as we embark on this thrilling exploration. On July 4, 1776, the Declaration of Independence was signed, marking the birth of a new nation. But how did the American colonies, once loyal subjects of the British Crown, come to the decision to revolt? The origins of this decision go back decades before 1776, when the colonies began to feel the weight of British rule. Taxation without representation, the heavy-handed policies of King George III, and the desire for self-governance created a perfect storm of discontent. The American Revolution wasn't just a fight for independence, it was a fight for freedom from oppression. But the question remains: why did the colonies succeed where other revolutions failed? Was it the strategic brilliance of George Washington, the alliances with foreign powers, or the sheer determination of ordinary citizens who took up arms? The revolution was far from easy. The Continental Army, under Washington's command, faced an overwhelming British force, and the outcome was uncertain. Yet, by 1783, the Treaty of Paris officially recognized American independence. How did the revolutionaries manage to turn the tide in their favor? Did it have something to do with the unity forged by necessity or the indomitable spirit of the American people? While the war brought freedom, it left behind a fragmented country struggling to unite. How would these disparate states form a government strong enough to hold the new nation together? The answer would be found in one of the most influential documents in world history. But what exactly did this document entail, and how did it set the stage for the United States' growth as a powerful nation? Let's uncover the story behind the U.S. Constitution. After securing independence, the fledgling United States faced an even greater challenge: how to create a government that would unite the 13 states while ensuring individual liberties and preventing tyranny. The Articles of Confederation, adopted in 1781, proved ineffective. A stronger central government was needed. In 1787, the Constitutional Convention convened in Philadelphia, and the task at hand was monumental. The Founding Fathers, including James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and Benjamin Franklin, debated fiercely over the best way to structure the government. Should it be centralized, or should states retain their sovereignty? How could they balance power between the executive, legislative, and judicial branches? What role would the states play? The result was the U.S. Constitution, which created a federal system with checks and balances designed to prevent any one branch from becoming too powerful. But the Constitution wasn't universally accepted. Many feared it gave too much power to the central government, leading to the addition of the Bill of Rights. The Constitution provided a foundation, but would it stand the test of time? How would it evolve to meet the needs of an expanding and diverse nation? As the Constitution laid the groundwork for the new government, the question of slavery loomed large. How would this institution, deeply embedded in the southern states, be addressed in a nation founded on liberty? The answer would be delayed, but not forgotten. As tensions simmered, the country was moving closer to a confrontation that would test its very foundation. Let's explore how this unresolved issue would eventually shape America's future. As the United States grew, so did the divisions between the North and the South. The issue of slavery was at the heart of this divide. The North, with its industrial economy, had largely abolished slavery, while the South remained dependent on it for its agrarian economy. But slavery was more than just an economic institution, it was a moral issue that would eventually tear the nation apart. By the 1830s, abolitionists like Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman were speaking out against the practice, while Southern leaders insisted that slavery was essential to their way of life. Tensions flared in 1861 when Southern states seceded from the Union, forming the Confederacy. The Civil War, which followed, was a brutal conflict that cost more than 600,000 lives. But it was also a war for the soul of the nation. President Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation in 1863 changed the course of the war, turning it into a fight not just for Union, but for the end of slavery. The war ended in 1865 with the defeat of the Confederacy, but the legacy of slavery would continue to haunt America. How would the nation rebuild, and could it truly achieve the equality promised by the Declaration of Independence? The end of the Civil War did not mark the end of America's struggles with race. Reconstruction efforts sought to rebuild the South, but the wounds of war and slavery were far from healed. What followed was a turbulent period that would change America's course forever. As tensions rose, the nation found itself at a crossroads, one that would determine its future path. Let's now take a closer look at how these events unfolded. After the Civil War, the United States entered a difficult phase known as Reconstruction. The nation had to rebuild, but the road to reunification was anything but smooth. The Southern states, deeply entrenched in a system of slavery and racial hierarchies, resisted the changes imposed by the North. President Abraham Lincoln's assassination in 1865 left the country in turmoil, and his successor, Andrew Johnson, pursued lenient policies toward the South. The radical Republicans in Congress, however, sought a harsher approach. They pushed through the Reconstruction Acts, which divided the South into military districts, enforcing the protection of African Americans' rights and guaranteeing their participation in politics. The passage of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments abolished slavery and granted citizenship and voting rights to former slaves. Yet, even as the nation sought to heal, tensions remained high. Many Southern whites resisted Reconstruction efforts, using violence and intimidation to prevent African Americans from exercising their new rights. Sharecropping, a system where freed slaves worked the land in exchange for a portion of the crops, often left them in debt and living in poverty. In the North, the Gilded Age ushered in a new era of rapid industrialization, creating immense wealth but also leading to widespread corruption and inequality. Political machines like Tammany Hall dominated urban centers, while business tycoons like Andrew Carnegie and John D. Rockefeller amassed vast fortunes. As the nation's economy boomed, the divide between the rich and poor grew ever wider. The promises of Reconstruction seemed to slip away as the nation struggled to find a path to true equality. While Reconstruction failed to resolve the racial issues that haunted America, a new chapter in its history was being written. As the 20th century approached, America faced a new challenge: the influx of millions of immigrants eager to build a better life. But what would they find in the land of opportunity? In just a moment, we'll uncover how this wave of immigration shaped American society and the conflicts that arose along the way. At the dawn of the 20th century, the United States was a land of promise. The idea of the American dream, a place where anyone could rise from humble beginnings to prosperity, drew millions of immigrants from around the world. From 1880 to 1920, over 20 million people arrived, many passing through Ellis Island in New York Harbor. They came from all corners of the globe: Italy, Ireland, Germany, and Eastern Europe, seeking a better life in the New World. But despite the allure of freedom and opportunity, the reality for many immigrants was harsh. Upon arrival, they faced overcrowded and unsanitary conditions in urban tenements. Factory work was grueling and dangerous, with long hours and low wages. Immigrants often worked in sweatshops, enduring poor working conditions to make a living. Despite these hardships, many immigrants contributed greatly to America's industrial growth. They helped build railroads, worked in steel mills, and fueled the rise of cities. However, life in America wasn't always welcoming. Immigrants faced prejudice and discrimination, often relegated to the lowest rungs of society. Yet, their cultures and traditions became a vital part of the American identity, contributing to the rich mosaic of the nation's diversity. The American dream, however, was not equally accessible to all. While some immigrants achieved success, many struggled to make a living, questioning whether the promises of liberty and prosperity applied to everyone equally. The rise of labor unions and strikes during this period showed that the gap between the rich and the working class was widening. Did the American dream live up to its promise, or was it a myth for many? While immigrants poured into the country, a shift in the global landscape would soon force America to confront its place in the world. The outbreak of World War I marked the beginning of a new era, one in which the U.S. would assert its influence on the global stage. But how did the country navigate its growing role in this tumultuous period? Let's explore how America's actions would shape the course of history. World War I marked a pivotal turning point for the United States. Though initially neutral, America was drawn into the conflict in 1917 after the sinking of the Lusitania and the interception of the Zimmermann telegram, which revealed a German plot to ally with Mexico against the U.S. The entry of the U.S. into the war tipped the scales in favor of the Allies. Despite the war's devastation in Europe, America's involvement helped bring about an armistice in 1918, and the nation emerged as a major global power. The aftermath of World War I, however, brought challenges of its own. The 1920s saw economic prosperity in the U.S., but this prosperity was built on fragile foundations. The stock market crash of 1929 led to the Great Depression, one of the most severe economic crises in history. But it was World War II that would truly define America's role as a global superpower. The U.S. initially sought to remain neutral in the conflict, but the attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, brought the nation into the war. Over the next few years, America provided critical support to the Allies, both militarily and economically. The U.S. military played a decisive role in the defeat of Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan. By 1945, the world had been forever changed. The U.S. had not only won the war but had emerged as the world's most powerful nation. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, while controversial, solidified the U.S.'s status as a military superpower. The war had shown the world that America could mobilize its resources and military might in a way that no other nation could. But with victory came the onset of the Cold War, a period of geopolitical tension with the Soviet Union that would shape much of the second half of the 20th century. What lay ahead for the United States in this new era of global competition? As the U.S. emerged from World War II as a dominant global force, the next chapter in American history would be defined by the ideological battle of the Cold War. How would America confront the growing threat of communism on the global stage? In just a moment, we'll dive into the key moments that defined this intense rivalry and shaped the future of the nation. Following the end of World War II, the United States found itself at the forefront of a new global order. As the war had shattered Europe and Asia, the U.S. emerged as a dominant force in both military and economic power. But as the 20th century progressed, the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union became a defining feature of global politics. The ideological battle between democracy and communism set the stage for decades of geopolitical tension. The Korean War, 1950 to 1953, and the Vietnam War, 1955 to 1975, were the most significant military conflicts of the Cold War era, both fueled by the fear of communist expansion. The U.S. sought to contain communism through direct intervention, covert operations, and alliances with non-communist nations. At the same time, the space race was unfolding, with the U.S. and Soviet Union vying for technological and scientific superiority. The 1969 Apollo 11 mission, which saw Americans land on the moon, symbolized the triumph of U.S. innovation and marked the nation's space leadership. But as tensions escalated, the world was never far from the brink of nuclear war. The Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962 brought the U.S. and the Soviet Union to the edge of a nuclear confrontation. Despite this, the Cold War also saw significant cultural, scientific, and social advances in the U.S., and the United States became synonymous with global influence and leadership. As the Cold War shaped much of the second half of the 20th century, the U.S. also saw remarkable social change. From the Civil Rights Movement to the Cultural Revolution, America was changing in ways that would redefine its future. But what exactly were these changes, and how did they impact America's position on the world stage? Let's take a closer look. The 1960s and 1970s were transformative years for America, as the civil rights movement reshaped the nation's social fabric. For decades, African Americans had fought against racial segregation and inequality, but it wasn't until the leadership of figures like Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, and Malcolm X that the movement truly gained momentum. King's "I Have a Dream" speech in 1963 at the Lincoln Memorial became a defining moment in the struggle for civil rights, calling for an end to racism and discrimination. The movement resulted in the passage of landmark legislation, including the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which outlawed segregation and protected voting rights for African Americans. At the same time, the U.S. experienced a cultural revolution, with the rise of youth counterculture, protests against the Vietnam War, and the expansion of personal freedoms. The feminist movement gained ground with leaders like Betty Friedan, and LGBTQ+ rights became an increasingly important issue in American society. While these movements sought equality, they also highlighted the deep divisions within the country, particularly in terms of race and class. Though progress was made, many Americans were still fighting for equality in different forms. While the civil rights movement marked significant social progress, the U.S. continued to face challenges in its economic and political systems. As the country entered the 1980s, it would grapple with a new era of economic growth, but also rising tensions both at home and abroad. Next, we'll see how these challenges shaped the nation's future, and how the 1980s became a pivotal decade in American history. The 1980s ushered in a new era for the United States under President Ronald Reagan. Reagan's administration marked a shift in both economic policy and foreign relations, as he pursued a conservative agenda focused on reducing government spending and promoting free market principles. Reaganomics, as it was called, emphasized tax cuts, deregulation, and a strong defense posture. Despite criticism that it disproportionately benefited the wealthy, Reagan's policies led to economic growth, and by the end of the decade, the U.S. economy was booming. On the global stage, Reagan took a tough stance against the Soviet Union, famously calling it the evil empire. His administration ramped up military spending and supported anti-communist movements in Latin America, Africa, and Asia. The arms race intensified, but Reagan's willingness to engage in dialogue with Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev led to a thawing of relations. The INF Treaty in 1987, which eliminated intermediate-range nuclear missiles, marked a significant step toward de-escalating the Cold War. At home, however, America faced a growing wealth gap, and the promises of Reaganomics were seen as a double-edged sword for the middle and lower classes. Yet, in the late 1980s, the U.S. enjoyed a period of relative peace and prosperity. While the 1980s were defined by economic growth, the new challenges of the 1990s would push the United States into a globalized world. In just a moment, we'll explore how America navigated the end of the Cold War and the rise of a new global economy. How would the country adapt to these shifting tides? Stay tuned to find out. Entering the 21st century, the United States faced unprecedented challenges. The economy was thriving at the turn of the millennium, but it wasn't long before the global landscape shifted dramatically. The attacks on September 11, 2001, marked a pivotal moment in American history, reshaping the nation's foreign policy and domestic priorities. In the aftermath, the U.S. engaged in the War on Terror, leading to wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. The global economic crisis of 2008 also tested America's economic resilience, bringing the country to the brink of a depression. Despite these challenges, the U.S. remained a dominant power, both militarily and economically. The rise of the internet, social media, and technology companies positioned America at the forefront of the digital age. The Obama administration's historic election in 2008 represented a step toward a more inclusive America, but political polarization and social divisions continued to shape the nation's discourse. As the 21st century progresses, the U.S. faces new challenges, from climate change to global economic competition, but its place as a superpower remains unchallenged. How will America adapt to the changing world and the new challenges of the future? While the U.S. has overcome many obstacles, its future remains uncertain. Will the country rise to meet the challenges of the new world, or will history reveal that the American superpower has reached its limits? From the early days of space exploration to the moon landing and beyond, the United States has been at the forefront of humanity's quest to understand the universe. The space race against the Soviet Union marked a significant chapter in the Cold War, but it also symbolized America's leadership in science, technology, and innovation. The Apollo program captured the imagination of the world, inspiring generations of Americans to look to the stars. Today, space exploration continues to be a key element of America's global strategy, with private companies like SpaceX now leading the way. But what does America's future in space look like? Will it continue to push the boundaries of exploration, or will new international powers challenge its position in this high-stakes race? While America reached for the stars, its technological dominance was quietly reshaping the world in other ways. Next, we'll explore how the digital revolution is transforming the nation's global power and what lies ahead in the high-tech age. As the world entered the digital age, the United States once again found itself leading the charge. Silicon Valley became synonymous with innovation, and tech giants like Apple, Google, Microsoft, and Facebook revolutionized the way people live, work, and communicate. America's dominance in the technology sector has transformed the global economy, giving rise to new industries and creating unprecedented opportunities. But with technological power comes great responsibility. As issues like data privacy, artificial intelligence, and cybersecurity grow more complex, America must navigate new ethical challenges while maintaining its leadership position in a rapidly changing world. The digital revolution is far from over. What will the next chapter of technological advancement hold for the United States, and how will it shape the future of the globe? As technology continues to evolve, so too does the nature of warfare, diplomacy, and influence. What does the future of global power look like in the age of cyber conflict? The history of the United States is not just a tale of triumphs. It's a saga of resilience, transformation, and untold stories that have shaped the very world we live in. From its audacious birth as a rebellious colony to its meteoric rise as a global superpower, America has carved a path through history, leaving a lasting legacy that reverberates around the globe. Its founding ideals, freedom, democracy, and the pursuit of happiness, continue to echo in every corner of the world. But while this chapter may seem complete, the story of the United States is far from finished. In fact, the challenges it faces today are unlike any before: economic uncertainties, environmental crises, and shifting global alliances. So, what does the future hold for this powerful nation? Will its spirit of innovation and resilience be enough to navigate these uncharted waters? As we look back on the extraordinary journey of America, we can only ask, what comes next? The next chapter in this saga is already unfolding, and it promises to be just as gripping as the past. But remember, this is only one part of the grand story of humanity. What other untold histories will we uncover together? Don't miss out on the incredible discoveries still to come. Subscribe to the Great Chronicles YouTube channel and join us on a journey through history's most captivating tales. The adventure is just beginning.